Hi guys, welcome back to another Philippian tutorial. This tutorial is going to be all about keyframes and opacity. And so those have a large amount of interplay, and so we can talk about how those work together. So really quick, let's just look at an example of using both keyframes and opacity together. Here we are back again on the Philippian trip video, and so we're going to just look at this video and see how it works using keyframes and opacity. So let's just watch this clip. Okay, right here. Okay, so you guys might have noticed these kind of cool light leaks or kind of lens flare sort of things coming through here. And so that's a combination of using both keyframes, opacity, and screening modes. Okay, or sorry, blending modes. So what happens is we have this, we have our source footage down here, our main footage, which is just a person here taking a photo and then another person with a camera. And so what we can see is that we have two clips on our timeline here if we zoom in. And so we have our base footage here, and then this is what we call, this is our light leak footage. And so you can see that the source footage for this light leak is kind of, it's not too pretty in and of itself. You can see that it's set on a black background and that it comes through. But in here, you can see when we're in the main project, it's not really set that way. So the first thing we're going to talk about are some blending modes. And so what we did in order to remove that black background and make it so that it's transparent is that once we placed the clip that we wanted on the timeline, we're able to come up into our effect controls on that clip. And you know what, I'll bring in a new clip. So say we wanted one between here. So when you place that down on there, since it's on top, it basically just covers it up completely, and there's no way to look through. You lose everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on this clip, come to Effect Controls, and you can see you have your motion, which is what we use the most, and then we have an opacity one right below that. And in the opacity, you can see that it's set to 100%, which is what you typically want it at. If we bring it down to 0, you can see that it's not there anymore, and then kind of in between it's coming in. But even that's not really what we want. What we want is to change the blending mode from normal, which is what most things are set at, to screen. And if we change the screen, you can immediately notice that we see the people, or the footage beneath it. And so what screen does is it takes everything that's pure black, and it simply makes it transparent. So all of the area that was black before, since this was set on a black background, is now transparent. Inversely, if you had something that was, say, set on a white background and you wanted to remove everything that was white, you could do multiply. And that'll have a very different effect, and you can see that it has a very different effect on our footage. And that could be something that you're going for stylistically, but it doesn't really work, in my opinion, for this clip. Also, there's a bunch of different blending modes that you can play around with. One of them that I use a fair amount is overlay. And you can see overlay has an interesting effect as well, but it still might not be what we're going for. So for this clip, I think screen works the best, although you can play with the other ones. So we'll use screen, and then already that's looking a lot better. It's a nice little transition between the two clips, except I think it should be moved forward just a little bit. It's a nice transition between the two. Okay, but now let's look a little bit at opacity and keyframes. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to have this opacity, and we want it to kind of ease in so that it starts at 0, and it eases up to 100 at the transition of the two clips, and then it eases back out so that you don't have this very hard transition. And so that's going to use both this opacity and the keyframes. And so what we're going to do is, see, this is a keyframe right here. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one because it's kind of lying around in not so great location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to come a little bit before the cut in the two clips, and I'm going to press this icon, which add or removes a keyframe. So it added a keyframe right there. I'm going to move forward a little bit, just a little bit past the cut, and so I have a keyframe right here. I'll add a keyframe, and so you can see kind of where that is. And then what I'll do is I'll go all the way to the end there, and you can see it's at the end. I'll bring the opacity down to 0, and you can see it automatically added a keyframe since we changed the value. Again, I'm going to go to the beginning, and I'm going to put it to 0 as well, and you can see it automatically added a keyframe since we changed the value. And you can see that it linearly ramped those keyframes so that it goes from 0, ramping up. You can see it's ramping up to 100. And then since these keyframes are both at 100, it'll stay there. And then it ramps back down again. If you put something weird in the middle here, it would ramp down, ramp back up, and then ramp all the way down. But we don't want that. We're going to take that, press delete. And so then we have something that looks a lot more like that. And already I think that looks pretty good. And you can see that it kind of comes on slowly and then dissipates pretty quickly. And I think it's just a nice transition between clips. So that's kind of the basics of blending mode, opacity, and keyframes. However, you can use these things in a bunch of different ways. Let's look at one more way that you can use opacity. So in this opening shot, what I did is I motion tracked, and we can, turn the quality up there. I motion tracked these text layers. So NYC, because we're heading to NYC, and CXXXVII, because that's the board number for our board currently. And so what you can see is that these are transparent text objects. They're not 100% opaque. You can see this person's leg through the text. And especially with text, I think that's something that really makes a huge difference in what the text feels like. And actually, you can see that this text has a black outline around it. And I don't really like that. I think I'll take that out later after I finish this. But I really do like how the text is transparent, and it adds a different element of kind of realism to the scene, whereas if you had completely opaque text, it might feel kind of out of place. Okay, let's look at one more place that you could use keyframes and opacity when you're creating a video. So say I have this clip here, and I have kind of this, actually let's go to these two. I have this kind of shot of a sign, the welcome to Connecticut, you can kind of see there, and then a shot of the kind of the bus driving along. And I want to do an opacity overlay. So what I'll do is I'll bring one of these clips up so it's above, and I'm going to unlink these two layers. So I unlinked the audio and the video by right-clicking and saying unlink. And so then I'm able to move the video independently. And so what I want to do is I'm going to have this clip running along, and then I'm just going to take this clip here, go to opacity. I'm not going to change the blend mode, but rather I'm just going to keyframe the opacity. So I'll keyframe it so that it's 100 right here, add a keyframe, and then I'll go back to the beginning and turn it all the way down to 0. So now that's just a basic crossfade, but we could do something more interesting than that if we wanted to. We could bring this all the way out here, since I know that this is a really long clip. And you can see you can't see it now because of our keyframes, but what we could do is we could bring it back, move this one so it's at 100. So this comes in, it fades to this clip, we'll add another one at 100, and then maybe another one at 0. And that's kind of awkward placement potentially. Maybe if we move this over, it might work better. These might not be the two absolute best clips to be blending together, but you'll see effects like this pretty frequently in music videos or whatnot, where they do a lot of fades to one, fades back to another, just because it's a pretty stimulating effect when you use it properly. So that's another way that you can use opacity to do that. But now you can see our opacity is at 0, so I'll turn it back up to 100 so that this clip is actually there. And so you can see that it adds keyframes right at the beginning there. So there are keyframes added at these values. And so let's say we want to go in a little ways. We'll scale up let's go back. We'll go back to the beginning, and we'll scale up this clip to 130. And then we can move it so that maybe it's a little bit lower and it's a little bit farther to this side, so you can see the edges of the clip. And then let's go maybe to the end of the clip, and then we can scale it up even a little bit more. We can bring this down, and we can, if we click on this, we can see it a little better. We can move this over. And so you can see this line here, which illustrates how the two keyframes are going to affect the movement. And so then when we scrub through this, you can see that this will kind of move along that path. If I play it here, we can see it better. And so you can see that it kind of pans up to the top. Now, it's good to notice that when you kind of scale this clip up like I did, the shaking in the clip does become a lot more noticeable in the clip. But say you had a picture or something of that effect where you wanted to give it a little bit more life and animate its position and potentially scale, or even rotation throughout that clip. Additionally, say you had an interview with someone and they were moving around a fair amount in the frame, and maybe you or your cameraman didn't really line up the frame as well as you wanted to, you could potentially scale it up and keyframe the position so that the person is lined up with the rule of thirds or in the center of the frame, of something of that nature to make the shot a little bit nicer. Okay, well that about wraps it up for some keyframes, opacity, and even a few light leaks in here. And so that's just something that you'll hear me talking about a fair amount, saying keyframe the position or keyframe the opacity or anything of that nature. And it's a really useful tool to have in your toolbox. There's a lot you can do with keyframes. They're much more complicated than I made them out to be today, but we can address all of that in our future video. So thanks for watching, and I'm Castin Day.